His abuse took my mom's life, so I took everything from him. Justice isn't always handed out the way it should be. Sometimes, the people who do the most harm walk away without consequences and the system just shrugs. But that doesn't mean they always get away with it. Sometimes, you have to take matters into your own hands legally, of course. For years, my ex-stepfather, Richard, controlled my mom through manipulation, financial abuse, and outright cruelty. When she was diagnosed with cancer, he didn't just fail to support her, he actively made things worse. He delayed her treatments, drained their shared bank account, and did everything he could to make her suffer. And when the courts told me there was nothing they could do to hold him responsible, I found another way. This is how I legally took everything from him. Growing up, my mom, Margaret, was the kind of person who would do anything for the people she loved. She worked hard, always put others first, and never let life's hardships break her spirit. Then she met Richard, and everything changed. At first, he seemed like a decent guy. He had a stable job, a house, and the kind of charm that could fool anyone at least for a while. They got married, and for the next 16 years, I watched as he slowly chipped away at my mom's independence. He controlled the finances, isolated her from friends, and made every decision for the both of them. By the time I was old enough to move out, I was relieved to escape his presence. But I always worried about my mom. Years later, when I was in my late 20s, I decided to go back to school to build a better future for myself and my family. Surprisingly, both my mom and Richard supported the idea, even offering me the basement apartment in their house so I could save money while I studied. At the time, I thought maybe Richard had mellowed out with age. I was wrong. A year and a half into my studies, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. It was devastating news, but we were hopeful her doctors had a plan. She was scheduled for surgery and everything was set in motion. Then, just a week before the operation, one of the tumors ruptured and things took a turn for the worse. The cancer spread and she was re-diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form that affected her connective tissue. From that moment on, Richard became unbearable. He refused to accept that my mom was sick, acting as if her diagnosis was some kind of personal inconvenience to him. He was in the room when the doctor explained her new prognosis: 2 years with treatment, much less without. Instead of supporting her, he threw a tantrum. Right there, in front of the doctor, he stormed out, shouting, "My wife won't be doing any of that chemo nonsense." The doctor noted everything in my mom's medical records, including the fact that she told them she was afraid for her life. She knew she needed treatment to survive, but she also knew Richard would do everything in his power to stop her. And that's exactly what he did. He drained their joint bank account, leaving her without money for basic necessities. He cut the brake lines on her car, making sure she couldn't drive herself to appointments. He controlled every part of her life, keeping her isolated and dependent on him. The only reason she made it to any of her treatments at all was because my spouse and I stepped in, driving her whenever we could. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. She moved into my basement apartment, desperate for safety and stability. That's when I knew I had to take action. I told Richard, straight to his face, that if he didn't stop his abuse, I would make sure he was held accountable for everything he had done. He just laughed and said, "What can you do? You're just a woman." That was the moment I decided I would take everything from him. Richard must have thought I was bluffing, but I wasn't. I wasn't going to sit back and let him keep destroying my mom's life. I got her a lawyer, and I started learning everything I could about criminal law. If the system wasn't going to hold him accountable, I was going to make sure he paid in every way possible. Over the next 8 months, I gathered evidence. I installed security cameras in the house, not in secret, but in plain sight. Richard knew they were there. He just didn't care. Or maybe he thought he was untouchable. Either way, he didn't hold back. Every cruel word, every threat, every moment of him trying to sabotage my mom's treatment, I caught it all on video. At the same time, I started looking into how to get him out of the house legally. Since my mom and Richard own the home as joint tenants, I couldn't just kick him out. But I had another plan. I got pre-approved for a mortgage to buy out his share. All he had to do was sign one piece of paper, and he would have walked away with $250,000. It was an easy deal. No fighting, no court battles, just money in his pocket and a clean break. He refused. Instead, he sneered at me and said, "You're not getting my house. I'll see your whole family on the street before I let you take it." I smiled at him and said, "Okay." And then I went to work. We served Richard with a summons ordering him to court. He ignored it, said he knew more than the lawyers and didn't have to show up. That was the best mistake he ever made. Because when he failed to appear, the court ruled in my mom's favor. She was granted sole possession of the home. Richard's assets were frozen to prevent him from liquidating anything. A restraining order was put in place. That night, police came to the house, evicted him, and changed the locks. For the first time in years, my mom was free. With Richard out of the picture, she finally had access to the resources she needed. We got her on disability assistance, which provided transportation to her treatments. She started chemo. She started fighting. And for a little while, things felt like they were getting better. Then, we took another step, breaking the joint tenancy on the house. We changed it to tenants in common, meaning my mom's share would go to me if anything happened to her instead of automatically defaulting to Richard. She also updated her will, making sure every single thing she owned would pass to me. Richard must have realized he was losing, because he suddenly decided he wanted to work things out. He refused to sign the divorce papers, dragged out every legal proceeding, and refused every settlement offer. His plan was obvious: stall everything and wait for my mom to die, so he could take it all back. In one court meeting, he flat out told the judge, "I'm not signing anything. I'll just wait for her to die and take everything." The judge looked him in the eye and said, "That's not how this works." He laughed. "I didn't. Because I had a plan for that too." Richard must have thought he was some kind of evil mastermind, playing a long game that only he could win. But he didn't realize that while he was sitting around, waiting for my mom to die so he could cash in, I was making sure he wouldn't get a single cent. For the next 2 years, I was my mom's full-time caregiver. I took care of her, made sure she got to every treatment, and handled everything in the house. Richard, on the other hand, kept fighting in court while also doing absolutely nothing to help. He refused to negotiate, refused to sign any papers, and kept up his delusional belief that he could just wait this out. Then one day, he disappeared. My mom's lawyer and I tried to serve him more legal documents, but suddenly, no one could find him. He stopped responding to calls, skipped every court date, and according to the court system, he had just vanished. Meanwhile, my mom's condition worsened. Not from the cancer itself, but from complications related to it. One day, a tumor ruptured, causing an upper gastrointestinal bleed. I was there when it happened. I held her in my arms. I tried to stop it, but there was nothing I could do. She died in my arms. I don't remember much from that day. The next few weeks were a blur. The grief was unbearable, but I didn't have time to process it. I had to handle everything: her funeral, her estate, the legal battles that Richard had left unfinished. I was diagnosed with PTSD from the trauma of watching her die, but even that had to be put on hold because there was still a fight to finish. With my mom gone, the will went into effect. Everything: her bank accounts, her possessions, her portion of the house transferred to me. Since she had been granted sole possession of the house before she passed, it was now mine. Richard, of course, was nowhere to be found. But that didn't matter. Legally, the house belonged to me. The court gave him a deadline to contest it. He missed it. Again. So his claim to the house was declared abandoned. That meant he no longer had any legal right to it. That should have been the end of it. But then, a friend of mine, who was way too good at internet sleuthing, found something interesting. Richard had fled the country. He was hiding out in Mexico. The man who once laughed in my face and told me he would take everything from me was now on the run, breaking court orders, and living in some random place where no one could find him. Well, almost no one. Richard had always been a man who thought he was untouchable. He had spent years controlling my mom, thinking he could get away with anything. He must have believed that by running off to Mexico, he could escape the consequences of his actions. But he clearly forgot who he was dealing with. While Richard was sipping watered-down margaritas in some cheap resort, my lawyer and I were making sure he could never reclaim what he thought was his. Since Richard had vanished, he wasn't showing up for court. His name was still technically on the house, but with every legal deadline he missed, the courts ruled more and more in my favor. Eventually, his claim to the house was fully abandoned. That meant one thing: Richard no longer had any legal right to it. Of course, the courts weren't just letting him off the hook entirely. Even though he had lost the house, he still had debts, big ones. He owed over $50,000, including legal fees, shared mortgage payments, and every repair I had to make to the house after he neglected it for years. And since he was refusing to show up for court, the judge ruled that if he ever wanted a cent from the house, his debt would be deducted first. Realistically, he would have owed so much that even if he tried to sell his share, he'd end up with nothing. He could either take the tiny, pitiful payout after I deducted everything he owed, or get absolutely nothing if he never came back. It was checkmate. But here's the best part: since he fled the country, he also violated the court order that had banned him from leaving. That meant he had bigger problems than just losing the house. If he ever set foot back in Canada, he wouldn't be walking into a courtroom. He'd be walking into handcuffs. So now, Richard has two choices: stay in hiding forever, never getting a cent from the house, and spending his golden years looking over his shoulder. Come back, face the courts, lose all his money, and possibly go to jail. Either way, he's lost. As for me, I'm still here. I live in the house that my mom and I fought for. I won't lie, there are hard days. The house is filled with memories, some beautiful, some painful. But every time I walk through the front door, I know that my mom's sacrifice wasn't in vain. I made sure Richard didn't win. And if he ever tries to come back and take what he thinks is his, well, let's just say I've learned a thing or two about the law. He won't win.